Ma'am, what exactly are you doing in here?
I'm shopping. It's a store.
Yeah, see, people like you don't usually hang around places like this. Why don't you put that down and head out before this becomes something?
Excuse me, I've done nothing wrong. She's been making me uncomfortable since she walked in. Just walking around, looking at everything, not buying anything.
Fine, but you're...
A white woman named Ashley Johnson had been inside Blueville Luxury Boutique for less than 15 minutes when she pulled out her phone and called her husband, Officer Matthew Johnson, telling him there was a suspicious black woman circling the merchandise floor who had been in the store too long without buying anything and was making her feel unsafe. Officer Johnson arrived within minutes and confronted the woman mid-browse, told her that people like her did not usually shop in places like this, and when she calmly stated she owned the boutique, he accused her of lying, snapped handcuffs onto her wrists in front of a stunned floor of customers, and began walking her toward the exit. What Officer Johnson and his wife did not know, what they were approximately 90 seconds from discovering in front of every phone in that boutique, was that the woman in handcuffs was Gemily Davis, founder and chief executive of Blueville Luxury Boutique, a 5-location retail chain she had built from a second mortgage and a decade of 16-hour days. That the general manager would walk through the front door while she was still being dragged toward it. That a 30-second Google search would confirm everything she had been saying since the moment the officer approached her. And that their coordinated assumption, that a black woman browsing expensive dresses in an upscale boutique must be a criminal, would cost Officer Johnson his badge, cost Ashley her reputation, cost the city a settlement, and produce a viral video that 60 million people would watch before the week was over. Before we go any further, drop a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from. We love seeing where this community reaches. And if you believe that browsing your own boutique while black should never end in handcuffs, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell us below whether you think what happened next was justice or just the beginning of it. Because what unfolded inside Blueville Luxury Boutique that Thursday afternoon was not a miscommunication or a pressure decision made in a difficult moment. It was the visible, documented, camera-recorded result of two people, one in uniform and one pretending to shop, who looked at a black woman moving through an upscale retail space and decided, separately and then together, that her presence required explanation. And it was the predictable outcome of an institution that had received complaints about this officer before, filed them, and done nothing. Until the afternoon they handed the person he arrested a lawsuit, a settlement, and a platform. Let's go back to 2:15 on a Thursday afternoon inside Blueville Luxury Boutique, and walk through every second of the security camera. The boutique is everything Gemily Davis designed it to be. 12-foot ceilings with pendant lighting positioned to catch fabric at its best angle. Marble floors in a warm ivory that photographs well and cleans quietly. Racks arranged by palette rather than category, the way she had always believed luxury retail should be organized, by feeling first, then function. Soft music threaded through concealed speakers at a volume that permits conversation without competing with it. 5 fitting rooms at the rear of the floor, each with full-length mirrors and seating for a companion. Every detail is deliberate. Every choice hers. Gemily walks through the glass entrance at 2:15 wearing dark tailored trousers, a cream blouse, and low leather heels that she purchased from one of her own suppliers 18 months ago. She is 38 years old and has been building this business for 7 years. The first location funded by personal savings and a second mortgage on the property she had owned since she was 29. The subsequent 4 locations funded by the revenue the first one generated once she proved the model worked. She employs 61 people across 5 boutiques. She opened this flagship location 8 weeks ago. Today she is here without announcement, without a scheduled meeting, without any signal to the staff that the person now walking through the door is the person who signs their contracts. She wants to see what the floor looks like when no one is performing for her. She moves to the evening wear section first, drawing her fingers along a rack of dresses she sourced personally from 3 different designers over 2 buying seasons. She checks the spacing between hangers, slightly too tight on the right end, a note she makes mentally. She examines the way a deep emerald gown is displayed on the mannequin near the window, and decides the lighting angle needs adjusting. She pulls a charcoal blazer from a nearby rack and holds it against herself in front of the mirror, not because she intends to buy it but because she wants to see how it reads from the customer's side of the experience. She is, in every observable sense, browsing. Thoughtfully, unhurriedly, in the way that people browse when the purchase is secondary to the pleasure of looking. Ashley Johnson is standing near the mirrored display at the front of the store when Gemily enters. She is in her mid-40s, dressed in workout clothes that suggest a recent gym visit, carrying a structured bag that costs more than most people's monthly rent. She glances up at the door chime and her eyes locate Gemily immediately. They do not move away. Ashley pretends to examine a silk blouse on the nearest rack while tracking Gemily's path across the floor with the focused attention of someone who has already decided what she is looking at and is now simply waiting for the behavior that confirms it. 5 minutes pass. Gemily moves from evening wear to the separate section. She pulls 2 items, checks the labels, returns one and drapes the other over her arm. 10 minutes pass. Gemily circles to the accessories wall. She lifts a scarf, examines it, sets it down. She is now carrying 3 items, a blazer, a silk blouse, and a dress she selected from the back of the evening wear rack, a deep burgundy piece she does not remember approving for this season and wants to examine more closely. To any retailer, any experienced floor manager, any customer who has ever spent time in a luxury boutique, this is unremarkable behavior. Browsing. Selecting. Considering. Ashley steps toward the corner near the fitting rooms and makes a call. Her voice is lowered but not sufficiently. Several words carry across the floor: suspicious, walking around, doesn't look right, not buying anything, uncomfortable. The call lasts less than 90 seconds. She returns to the front of the store, places herself beside the mirrored display, and resumes the performance of shopping. Officer Matthew Johnson arrives 9 minutes later. He enters through the main door in full uniform, badge visible, service weapon holstered, radio crackling at his hip. He is tall, broad-shouldered, and moves through the boutique with the particular authority of someone accustomed to spaces rearranging themselves around his presence. The officer states that a complaint has been received about a suspicious woman circling the merchandise floor. He tells her that people like her do not usually come into places like this. He asks her what she is doing in the store. Gemily answers that she is shopping, calmly, without confrontation, in the tone of someone who has been through a version of this before and knows that the correct response is clarity rather than escalation. She explains that the items on her arm are dresses she selected to try on. She offers to show him the items if needed. He tells her to leave. Gemily states that she will not be leaving. She has done nothing wrong and has every legal right to remain on the premises. She tells him she owns the boutique. Johnson's expression does not shift. In his assessment, the claim is a deflection, the kind of thing people say when they are trying to complicate a simple situation. He has already decided what he is looking at and the information does not fit, so it is set aside. Stella, a sales associate who has been helping a customer near the accessories wall, moves toward the confrontation. She has been with the boutique for 4 months. She looks at the officer and then at Gemily and makes her decision in approximately 3 seconds. The officer is in uniform, the woman is being told to leave, and the correct response is institutional alignment. She tells Gemily that if the officer is asking her to go, she needs to comply. She does not ask Gemily a single question. She does not request the officer's justification. She simply adds her authority, such as it is, to the weight already pressing down on the woman at the center of the room. Ashley, from her position near the mirrored display, speaks up. She tells the officer that she has been watching this woman circle the same merchandise for 20 minutes without buying anything. She says it does not look right. Her voice carries the settled confidence of someone who believes the situation is proceeding exactly as it should. Gemily looks at Ashley. The geometry of the room becomes clear to her all at once. The woman who made the call, the husband who answered it, the sales associate who defaulted to the uniform without asking a question. 3 people have now stacked their authority against her. None of them have evidence. None of them have asked to see her identification. None of them have inquired about the documents in her portfolio, or the corporate card in her wallet, or the email chain on her phone that includes a site visit note for this location dated this afternoon. Johnson pulls the handcuffs from his belt. The dresses fall from Gemille's arms and land on the marble floor in the specific, unhurried way that expensive fabric lands when it has been released rather than dropped. She does not resist. She places her hands behind her back with the deliberate composure of someone who understands that resistance will be used against her and that the truth, which is already in this room and available to anyone willing to look for it, does not require her to fight for it with her body. The metal clicks shut around her right wrist. Then she left. Customers who have been watching since the officer walked in now raise their phones openly. A woman near the fitting rooms takes a step back to widen her frame. A man at the register stops mid-transaction and turns fully to face the floor. The boutique goes quiet in the way that spaces go quiet when something unjust is occurring in plain sight, and the witnesses are still deciding what their role in it is. Johnson takes Gemille by the arm and begins moving toward the entrance. She does not plant her feet. She walks. Past the evening wear rack she examined when she first arrived, past the mannequin whose lighting angle she noted needed adjustment, past the blazer she set down because it was not quite right for the season. She is being walked out of her own building by a man who does not know it is her building and is not interested in finding out. She calls for the manager. She says his name clearly and loudly enough to carry over the ambient music. She says it again. The glass doors at the front of the boutique open from the outside. Scott Turner, the general manager of Blueville Luxury Boutique's flagship location, steps through carrying a folder of inventory reports under one arm and a coffee cup in the other hand. He has been with Gemille's company for 3 years. He has attended every location opening. He reports to her directly. He sees the officer first. Then the woman in handcuffs beside him. Then his brain processes the woman's face and the recognition hits with the physical force of something that cannot be unfamiliar once it has been seen. His folder hits the floor. He moves immediately, placing himself between Johnson and the exit, demanding to know what is happening. Johnson states that the woman was acting suspiciously and refused to leave after being ordered out. Scott's response is immediate and precise. The woman in handcuffs is Gemille Davis, founder and chief executive of Blueville Luxury Boutique. She is his employer. She owns this store and 4 others. Johnson's grip on Gemille's arm does not loosen. He accuses Scott of interfering with a lawful arrest. Scott pulls out his phone. The search takes 11 seconds. The results load with the completeness of a career built in public. Business press features, ribbon-cutting photographs, a Forbes profile from 2 years prior, a profile from a retail industry publication with Gemille's photo alongside an interview about opening the flagship location. Her face in every image is unmistakable. It is the face of the woman standing in handcuffs 3 feet away from the screen. Scott turns the phone toward Johnson. The officer looks at the screen. He looks at Gemille. He looks at the screen again. The confidence that has been present in his posture since he walked through the door undergoes a visible structural failure. Not dramatic, not sudden, but the specific, incremental collapse of a certainty that has just run out of room to stand in. He reaches for the key. His hands are not entirely steady as he works the lock. The cuffs come off. Gemille brings her wrists forward and the marks where the metal sat are visible to everyone on the floor close enough to see them. She does not look at her wrists. She looks at Johnson. Stella has not moved from the spot where she added her voice to the officer's instruction. Her face has gone the particular pale of a person processing, in real time, that the woman she told to leave her own boutique is the person whose name is on her employment contract. Ashley has begun moving toward the rear of the store with the careful, unhurried pace of someone who does not want to draw attention. A customer near the accessories wall, a woman who has been recording since before the handcuffs came out, steps deliberately into Ashley's path and asks her, loudly enough for the room to hear, whether she is the one who made the call. Ashley stops. The question has no safe answer, and the phone in the customer's hand has been recording long enough to already contain the answer regardless. Gemily does not raise her voice. She does not move toward Johnson or toward Ashley or toward Stella. She stands in the center of the floor, her architects designed to her specifications, and addresses Scott in the measured tone of someone who has shifted, mid-scene, from the person a situation is happening to into the person directing its next sequence. She instructs him to pull the security footage from the past 2 hours and ensure it is preserved. She instructs him to obtain contact information from every customer currently in the store. She tells him she will be contacting her attorney before she leaves the building. Johnson attempts to reframe the incident as a miscommunication, the word landing in the room with the hollow quality of a word chosen because better ones are not available. A customer near the front of the store announces, without being asked, that the video has been uploaded to 3 separate accounts in the last 4 minutes and is already accumulating views. Ashley's expression, which has maintained a residue of composed certainty through the officer's arrival and the handcuffing and the general manager's entrance, finally loses its last remaining structure. The magnitude of what she has set in motion is arriving in stages, and the stage currently arriving is the one where the internet knows her face. Gemily stands at the center of Blueville Luxury Boutique. Her wrists bear the marks of handcuffs that should never have been placed on them. The dresses she was carrying when the officer approached are still on the floor where they fell, burgundy and charcoal against ivory marble, exactly where her afternoon became something she had not planned for and something she is already, with complete precision, planning her response to. She is not broken. She is building the case. The attorney arrives 53 minutes after Gemily's call. She walks through the boutique's front entrance with the particular efficiency of someone who has already begun building a case in the car and is now simply gathering what the physical space can add to what her client described on the phone. She reviews the security footage in the back office with Scott Turner, while Gemily sits in the adjoining room with the contact sheets of every customer who agreed to leave their information. The footage runs from the moment Gemily entered the store to the moment Johnson worked the handcuff key with unsteady hands. It captures everything. The precise sequence of Ashley's attention locking onto Gemily, the phone call made while Ashley's eyes tracked Gemily across the floor, Johnson's approach with his hand already positioned on his belt before a single word had been exchanged, the full audio of what he said about people like her in places like this. And the moment the cuffs closed over wrists belonging to the woman whose framed portrait hangs in the back corridor of every Blueville Luxury Boutique. Location. The attorney watches it without stopping. Then she watches it again. She emerges from the back office with the settled expression of someone who has just been handed a case that does not require construction, only documentation. What the footage confirms, the subpoenaed records expand into something larger and more systematic. Officer Johnson had been working for the district for 25 years. Over that period, his personnel file had accumulated complaints with the steady, unaddressed persistence of water finding a low point in a floor. Minority citizens stopped without cause. Detentions initiated without probable cause and closed without arrest. Excessive force allegations, the majority involving Black and Hispanic individuals, all reviewed internally, all resolved with notations that indicated awareness and produced no meaningful consequence. His arrest dismissal rate for Black suspects ran at 41%, nearly 5 times the department's aggregate rate for white suspects across the same period. The pattern had been visible for over a decade to anyone who looked at the file with the intention of seeing it. The institution had looked repeatedly and chosen, each time, to see something that did not require intervention. Ashley's history surfaces in parallel. 4 prior calls to local law enforcement over 3 years, each one reporting a Black individual in a commercial or residential space as suspicious, none resulting in the discovery of any actual violation. A Black man browsing a hardware store for 11 minutes. A Black woman sitting in a parked car outside a coffee shop. A Black teenager waiting at a bus stop in Ashley's residential neighborhood. Each call framed in the language of discomfort and unease, words carefully chosen to communicate threat without describing behavior that would withstand scrutiny. The calls had been answered, processed, and filed. Nobody had looked at them as a series. The video that has been accumulating views since a customer uploaded it 4 minutes after the handcuffs came off reaches 8 million within the first 18 hours. The caption, "Owner of luxury boutique arrested in her own store," is enough to carry the clip without additional context. By 48 hours, it has been shared across every major platform, featured on 3 national news broadcasts, and cited in 17 separate opinion pieces about racial profiling in retail environments. The comment sections are not subtle in their response. Gemily does not watch the coverage. She is already past the stage of the story where the footage is news. She is in the stage where it is evidence. A question the footage raises that no share count resolves. If you had been standing in that boutique and watched what happened, watched an officer tell a black woman that people like her don't belong in places like this, watched the handcuffs go on, watched the general manager arrive and prove in 11 seconds what the officer refused to consider, would you have spoken up? Type, stand, if you believe most people would find their voice. Type, silent, if you think the room would have stayed quiet. The answer matters because the customers who did speak up are now listed as witnesses in a federal complaint. The criminal charges were filed 8 weeks after the incident. 4 counts: false arrest, official misconduct, deprivation of rights under the color of law, and filing a false police report. The prosecution's case is assembled from the security footage, the audio transcripts, the customer witness statements, the personnel file, the dismissal rate disparity, and the testimony of 6 prior victims who came forward after the video circulated. A black physician detained in a parking structure, a black professor stopped mid-jog, a black business owner questioned while opening his own premises at 6 in the morning. Each of them had filed complaints. Each complaint had been processed and dismissed. Stella is terminated before the charges are filed, the boutique's security footage showing her crossing the floor to endorse the officer's characterization without directing a single question at the woman being accused. Her employment record, added to the viral footage that shows exactly what she chose, follows her into every subsequent job application in retail management. 3 interviews end before a second meeting is scheduled. Ashley's exposure arrives through the footage and through the 4 prior call records, which are released in the course of the legal discovery process and reported on within 24 hours of their release. Her employer, a nonprofit whose donor base includes several organizations with explicit commitments to racial equity, receives a coordinated volume of contact within 72 hours of publication. She is asked to resign? She does. Her name, indexed permanently against the incident by search engines that do not forget, becomes the specific kind of public record that does not require a conviction to function as consequence. Before the story closes, a question worth leaving open. Do you believe success protects people from discrimination? That a title, a portfolio, a decade of documented achievement changes what a person encounters when they walk through a door? Share this story if you think it doesn't. Because the evidence in this case, the footage, the complaint history, the deposition, suggests that the only thing Gemily's success changed was the scale of the accountability that followed. Johnson's deposition takes place 10 weeks before the trial. The critical moment arrives near the end of the second session, when the prosecution asks a question whose simplicity is its precision. If a white woman had been browsing the floor for 20 minutes and then told him she owned the boutique, would he have believed her? Johnson pauses. The pause is long enough to be entered into the transcript with a notation. His answer that he probably would have is recorded, time-stamped, and certified. It does not require elaboration. It does not require context. It is a direct admission, in a formal legal proceeding, that the same claim made by a different person would have produced a different response, and that the variable between those 2 outcomes was race. The defense does not recover from it. The jury deliberates for 11 hours and returns guilty verdicts on all 4 counts. At sentencing, the judge addresses Johnson with the specific weight of someone closing an account that has been running overdrawn for 25 years, noting the complaint history, the dismissal pattern, the institutional failure to act, and the fact that the same bias documented in a personnel file for decades had culminated in the handcuffing of a founder in her own flagship store. Johnson received 10 years. The city's legal team settles Gemely's civil rights lawsuit for $850,000 rather than present the security footage, the personnel file, and the deposition transcript to a jury. The settlement is the largest retail racial profiling payout in the region's recorded history. The public reform mandates attached to it include an independent civilian review board, mandatory bias monitoring analytics for patrol assignment patterns, and a requirement that all complaints against officers be reviewed by a panel that includes no supervisory relationship to the officer in question. What the settlement documents do not capture is the infrastructure Gemely had already been building before she walked into the boutique that afternoon. For 2 years, quietly and without public announcement, she had been funding a civil rights monitoring initiative that collected anonymous data on racial profiling complaints across the city's commercial districts. The initiative had identified patterns in law enforcement conduct, mapped complaint concentrations by district and officer, and begun building the evidentiary foundation for a formal partnership with the City Council to implement bias reform measures. Johnson's name had appeared in the initiative's complaint database 14 times. Gemely had been planning to announce the partnership and the database the week she was arrested. The incident did not interrupt the plan. It accelerated it. The partnership is announced 6 weeks after the settlement, with the database presented as the quantitative foundation for the reform mandate already attached to the civil judgment. The announcement receives the kind of coverage that a data release alone would not have generated. The case had given it an audience that was already paying attention. 5 years after the afternoon Johnson walked through the boutique's front door with his hand on his belt, Blueville Luxury Boutique operates 12 locations. Annual revenue has reached $80 million. Gemely speaks at national retail and justice conferences, consulted by 6 major corporations on equitable loss prevention policy design, and her nonprofit, formally established with a portion of the settlement, has provided legal grants and bias training to retailers across 4 states. The flagship store hosts an anniversary celebration in the same space where the handcuffs were applied. Near the entrance, a small plaque marks the launch of the nonprofit and the reform partnership that followed. Most guests who pass it do not know the full story behind it. Some do. Johnson is in the 3rd year of his sentence. The department operates under the oversight structure the settlement mandated. The complaint dismissal pattern that accumulated for 25 years without consequence has not recurred, not because the culture transformed overnight, but because the architecture that allowed it to sustain itself has been partially dismantled, and the people responsible for maintaining what replaced it are required to report publicly on whether they are doing so. If you believe no one should have to prove they belong in a space they built, that dignity should not be contingent on a title being discovered at the right moment. Subscribe for more stories where hidden power meets institutional accountability, where preparation outlasts assumption, and where the people a system tries to diminish turn out to be the ones who rewrite its rules. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. And if you believe that corporations and institutions should face real, structural consequences when bias becomes policy and complaints become filing cabinet inventory, stay with us. Because these stories are not finished, and neither is the work. It was never about a dress on a boutique floor. It was about who is presumed to deserve the space they occupy, and who is required, again and again, to prove it. And sometimes the person being walked toward the exit in handcuffs is the one who holds the deed to the building.